Welcome to today's broadcast of North Idaho College Public Forum. The crew is comprised of NIC television students, and your moderator is North Idaho College political scientist Tony Stewart.
Over the past few years, we have had a number of programs in which we talked about human rights, and many of you viewers are very familiar with such organizations as the Kootenai County Task Force on Human Relations or the Northwest Coalition Against Malicious Harassment. In those programs, we have discussed some of the problems and also the good things that have happened in relation to human rights in areas such as legislation and all kinds of public seminars and forums. A unique part of that human rights movement that we have not talked about on this program in the past has been one of the real estate brokers in Coeur d'Alene and what he has done in the field of real estate, both locally and statewide, in addressing human rights through the real estate organizations, in sending a message for human rights, and also in the field of housing. Our guest is Marshall Mend, who is a realtor in Kootenai County. He has a very successful record during those years. He has been in the real estate business for the past 7 years. In 1980, he was the Coeur d'Alene Board of Realtors Rookie of the Year. He was also #1 producing realty in Coeur d'Alene in the years 1983, 1985, 1986, and he was #2 in 1984. He was the #1 producer nationwide in the Better Homes franchise, which is a national organization with the most closed transactions, more than 70 each year, and those were the years 1983, 1984, and 1985. More than $18 million in total sales that he's been involved in the last 4 years. He earned both the GRI designation and the coveted CRS designation, and he's the only realtor in the 5 northern counties of Idaho with the CRS designation. Marshall, welcome to the program. We're happy to have you here. And as I indicated in the introduction, we want to talk about how you've led in the field of real estate with human rights issues.
Well, Tony, thank you, and thank you for inviting me.
I'd like to start off with some background that relates to the Kootenai County Task Force on Human Relations. You certainly have to be listed as one of the founding members of that organization. Would you take just a minute to tell us about that? And we're going to get into how the role of real estate fit into some of the messages that we have had in human rights. But how did the Kootenai County Task Force come about and your part in that?
Well, there was I think it was the latter part of 1980. There was a Jewish man that had a restaurant out in Hayden Lake who was being harassed, and they had painted some swastikas on his restaurant, and a concerned group of citizens got together to support that man. And that's kind of where it all started. And that was probably, I think it was around December 1980. And then after that, there was a lady, the first part of 1981, a lady who lived in Coeur d'Alene who had 4 children. 2 of them were white, and 2 of them were half white and half black. And the 2 that were half white and half black were about 5 and 6 years old. And the little children were being harassed by a racist in the area, and they needed some support. And it was at that time that we formally started the Kootenai County Task Force on Human Relations. And the people who helped found the organization were Dina Tanners, who was probably the one that was the most instrumental in starting the group. She came to me. She came to Sandy Emerson, at that time was the president of the Chamber of Commerce. She went to the religious community, talked to Rick Morris and a few of the other ministers in town. Rick Morris became the head or president of the Kootenai County Task Force. He was our first president. And at that point, we went to work, and we went to work to see what we could do about passing some laws so people like Keith Gilbert, who was the man who was harassing these young children, couldn't do that. At that time, it was a misdemeanor to do that. It was not even a felony. And we were successful a couple of years later, I think it was 1983, that we passed a malicious harassment law and had that passed statewide. And today that is a felony. And today Mr. Gilbert is still in jail where he belongs, serving his time.
And your work in that has continued from that first meeting in 1980, and here we are in 1990, and you're still very active as a member of the board of directors of the Kootenai County Task Force on Human Relations, and also for years you have headed one of the major committees, the standing committees, and been involved with so many of the events that have taken place. And one of the things that has been so strongly supported by the task force is that one needs to be visible and one needs to have events in which we celebrate human rights and we celebrate cultural diversity. But you've carried that on over into your business work too, because not only have you been a very successful businessman, as we indicated on this program, but you also have taken that into the real estate field that we're in. Would you tell us how that came about? I know there was a logo that was developed by the Kootenai County Task Force, and from that logo you picked up on some things. I should first of all recognize Skip Cook, who was the person who developed the logo. Would you take that story forward for us and how it fits into real estate?
Well, Skip came up with a logo that had 5 different faces. There was a black person, a Native American, a Mexican American, a Jewish person, and an Anglo-Saxon person, all kind of together in the poster. And that was a poster that we used for the Kootenai County Task Force on Human Relations. And we tried to get that poster out as much as we could, and I thought that would be kind of a neat idea to get that out into the real estate community. And in real estate, in our equal opportunity ads, they have a little house with the HUD statement, equal housing opportunity, goes underneath that. And I said, why couldn't we use something like this instead of the little house? And I was told that, we could use that instead of the little house. And I thought that logo made a whole lot more sense. Well, I went to our local board, and we adopted it to use it, and we had it published in the paper, and it's still published till today in the Coeur d'Alene Press and the Spokesman Review on a daily basis. They don't charge us for it. It's just in the paper, and it says, Idaho is for everyone. And in the one in Spokane says, good neighbors come in many colors, and that's also co-sponsored by the Spokane Board of Realtors. Then we went to the state and wanted to get that passed statewide as our equal opportunity logo. And at that time, I was on the state board, on the State Equal Opportunity Committee, and then I became the chairman of that committee. And we made a presentation to the entire State Association of Realtors, and it was adopted, and we got that passed that would be our logo. And then we went about to get some billboards printed up, and we had it passed and approved that we could adopt the billboards, that we could have the billboards done. Then we ran out of money. Things were tough, and our funds were running low, and that was one of the things that got cut. So after about a year or year and a half with no money coming up to do it, we decided we'd raise some money right here in Coeur d'Alene to support the whole state function. And our local board and our local Equal Opportunity Committee got together, and Dave Fisher built a rocking horse. He's a local realtor, and he built a rocking horse, and he did that for a hobby. It was a big rocking horse. It was an adult-sized rocking horse, and we auctioned it off. And we raised enough money to order our posters and our billboards, and then we had the billboards donated on a space available basis by the billboard companies. Don Ray Billboards in North Idaho, and Southern Idaho, I think, is the Idaho Billboard Company, or Idaho Outdoor Advertising.
Yes, well, you certainly deserve the credit because you really initiated that whole process. And as you indicate, when you look at ads in the newspaper dealing with real estate, there is the very powerful visual image of diverse people of different colors and different cultural backgrounds. And as you drive through North Idaho and in Southern Idaho, you will find large billboards with that same symbol to everyone that we are a state of people of different color. And I even have seen them now in the state of Washington, in the Spokane area. There's some billboards that are using that same logo on them. So you have really done a lot to make sure that the message gets out, that that's what we stand for. And I want to take this opportunity on this program to commend you for that work.
Thank you, John.
Because you're one of those people that when you have those ideas, you just don't give up until they are realized. I have one of your brochures with me too, and I note that I don't think that we probably can pick that up at the bottom, but on this brochure, you have that same logo of the people that Skip Cook designed. So there are many, many people that get this message as they're also transacting business. Let's talk a little bit more about your philosophy on advertising human rights as well as we advertise other things, but doing it for not for commercial gain, but for trying to create a community and a state where people have harmony in human relations. And what brings us to mind is that you were one of 5 people who went to Sanders County, Montana. I guess it's close to 2 years ago now. And there was an evening where there was a rally at the Knoxon High School in Knoxon, Montana, within Sanders County, in which the people rallied because there were problems with white supremacy action in their county. And you spoke, as the other people did, to this, for a county that size, a large gathering. And I remember as you were making your presentation, you were being a salesperson. You had a lot of the posters with you, and you had brochures that were the human rights brochures. So that's a very long introduction to my question, but you are a salesperson, and you use that in the field of human rights. Give us some of your theories of how you think that is effective and using that approach.
Well, I think we have a lot of people that don't think that human rights is that important. You know, they're not prejudiced or not bigots or anything, but they don't feel that it's a problem, that it doesn't affect them, so it's really not a problem. But you know, when it affects one of our citizens, one of our neighbors, it affects us all. And I think that that's real important, and that people have got to understand that. That is real important. Our community, I think, is real supportive of our minorities. And if a few years ago, if you would have read the publicity that was going out and the reputation that we were getting because of one racist that we have living in our area, who is very vocal, you would think that this would be a bigoted area, and it's just the opposite. It's nothing of a kind. It's you can take a fellow like Walt Washington. In fact, Walt Washington is now in the real estate business. We have some ethnic realtors in our area, and for an area that doesn't have a lot of ethnic people in it. But Walt has been really successful in this area. He moved here 3 or 4 years ago, and he's run for city council, and he came real close to winning a city council seat after being here for only 3 years, and he ran against 3 real strong people. And I'm thankful that I didn't live in the city at the time that I couldn't vote for him, because I lived in the county, because I would have voted for Walt. But if I would have voted for Walt, I don't know which of the other 3 people that I would have not voted for, because they were all that good that he was running against. And he ended up with over 50% of the vote.
Yeah,
that's Coeur d'Alene.
Mm-hmm. But also, are you indicating that a lot of the public work that's going on, a lot of the advertising that's going on, that you and others are involved in, has helped individuals come to realization that they need to be active and that it's important, and that they should not be apathetic?
Absolutely. I think we need to get the word out, especially the advertising part. I felt, because of all the negative publicity that was being pointed at Coeur d'Alene and being pointed at North Idaho and being pointed at Idaho as being a racist community, that we had to counteract that. We could not let that stand, because if we would have let that go by without taking a stand, without getting the truth out, we would have become just what the people were saying about us. We would have become a bigoted area. We would have become a racist area, because those would have been the kinds of people that we would have attracted when they saw that, when they saw these things in the newspaper, when they saw the television reports. The racists would move here, the bigots would move here, and the good people would be afraid to move here. And it took a lot of selling and a lot of talking. And we didn't win all the time when we tried to convince people that this was not a racist community. It is tough, and it was tough, I know, with Jewish people, with black people. A lot of them are afraid to come here. A lot of them are still afraid to come here, but we're winning the battle. We have had some people, some black people have moved to the area. We've had Jewish people move to the area. We have businesses moving into the area, and just nothing but good things happening in Coeur d'Alene, and it just keeps getting better and better.
And you certainly from these advertising messages that we are a society for everyone. Can you give us some stories that, since you're in contact with so many people outside of this area, that the kind of things that we've been discussing on the program today that you have done, have you gotten reaction back that it has convinced people that those who were involved in hate groups were, and are certainly today, a very, very small group of people? Has the message gotten through in specific cases where people have contacted you?
Yes, there was Bob Potter, who heads up the Jobs Plus organization, brought a couple into me who were thinking about moving to the area and moving their company here, a manufacturing company. And they were working with another realtor, and he brought them into me, and they were really concerned, being Jewish, that they were going to have some problems because of the anti-Semitism in the area. And we sat down, we talked about them, and I just basically let them know, and I think I convinced them, because they're here now, that there is no anti-Semitism in the area, that you have a very, very few people who are racist, who are bigoted. And they were from Southern California and the Los Angeles area. And if you would compare the numbers here and the numbers there of the number of racists, the number of bigots that we have here and the number of bigots that they have there, percentage-wise, they probably outnumber us 10 to 1 on the number of racists and number of bigots. And this community just, I mean, it's a great place for anybody to live. It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter what religion you are. You know, this is just, it's for everybody. We even let racists come here. Isn't that a good deal?
I want to talk a little bit about some of the other events that the task force has been involved in addition to the work that you have done personally within the business community. You've been kind of the link between the board, the task force, and certainly the realtors, but other parts of the business community you're so active in. But let's talk about some of the events that you've been very involved in. The task force participates in the July 4th parade every year in Coeur d'Alene. There have been 2 major human rights celebrations in the city park over the past, in 1986 and 1987. Tell our viewers who might not be familiar with that how those events were put together, what happened, and what impact you think that had on the community. I mean, one thing I know I've heard you say a lot, and other members on the board of the task force, is that you also, in addition to sending messages to the general public that we are committed to human rights, you also send messages to hate groups and hate individuals that if they come here and they engage in their hate activity, that will not, number one, they will not be welcome in doing that, and number 2, that there will be prosecution if they violate the law. And so those events that we've been having, don't they do both of those things? And just give us a little background on some of those events.
One of the nice things that I see over here too is when there is a problem as far as human rights go, and there hasn't been for a while at least anything that's come up, but whenever there is a problem, they get prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and they really throw the book at them. And I think that's been real helpful. And we have in Idaho, thanks to the Kootenai County Task Force and the Northwest Coalition Against Malicious Harassment, the toughest laws in the nation dealing with racist groups. There's just nobody that compares with us as far as the laws that we've got here. Mm-hmm. As far as the human rights celebration that we put on, that was one exciting event. It was a lot of work, but it was well worth it. Out of that event, I think the biggest thing that event showed us, because that was, at that time, the Aryan Nations was having their Aryan Nations Congress, and we had our event at the same time. And the newspaper reports, in fact, the front page of the newspaper said it all. There was a picture of the Aryan Nation compound with a couple of Aryans holding their kids with machine guns and frowns on their faces. And then there was a picture of people in the park with them holding their kids with smiles on their faces and love in their hearts. And it just showed the difference between love and hate. And that is the difference. Just, that simple. And I think Bill Wasmuth says it the best. He says, saying yes to human rights is the best way to say no to bigotry and racism.
And that event in 1986 is something that we'll always remember, and it was in the city park. There were over 1,000 people present. The governor of this state was there. The governors of the other states in the area sent representatives, and I should identify for the viewers that in 1986 we invited people from the 5-state region of Wyoming, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and Montana. again, there was a lot of messages through a function and through advertising. Can you just kind of give us a little sketch of what all happened that day? Because again, it ties into you as a person who's always sending a message or selling a message or an idea, and that format fit that so well that day.
Well, we had different speeches. We had entertainment. We had proclamations from, I think we had over 220 proclamations from cities, counties, and states throughout the Northwest, representing, what was it, tens of millions of people? I think it was an enormous amount of people, but supporting human rights, not just in Coeur d'Alene, but in the entire Northwest. And the function itself was exciting. It was, there was entertainment there. There was it was just the feeling of brotherhood towards all people. And when you went there, you just felt that. And when you saw it, you felt it. And there were, I think we had people who, in this town, who before all of this started, that might have had some prejudice in their heart. But I think a lot of us have, kind of rooted out some of the prejudices that we carried with us because of some of the things that we've been doing. And every little bit that we can do to help promote understanding towards other people, I think, is a step in the right direction.
You got involved in the movement because some of your neighbors, that is, by that I mean neighbors in this county, were facing harassment. And I think that is such a testimony to you and the others who were there. There were about 15 at the very first meeting, and then many of us were at the next meeting. The next meeting was at First Christian Church in Coeur d'Alene. And that shows the spirit that's evolved through this whole process and how you've carried this over into encouraging the business community to do certain things. I want to get a little bit personal for a moment because you were doing it for others, but because of your work and your background, you yourself have faced some problems, have you not, at the height of the hate group activity itself?
I had the distinction of being on the hit list for the Order Number 2. And that was a little bit different. Not what you call real exciting. Maybe it was exciting for some, but it wasn't exciting for me. I wasn't crazy about it. But you got to stand up and be counted. You can't, live in fear. And you can't let people like that bully you around and push you around. They did it in Nazi Germany, and they're not going to do it in North Idaho.
Certainly there have been others that have testified the same thing, and the president of the Kootenai County Task Force at the time that these things were happening in 85 and 86, Bill Wasmuth, who was a Catholic priest at St. Pius, had his home bombed, and there were 2 weeks later other bombs went off downtown. Would you say, Marshall, that we've gone through all these different periods from 80 to 90, and we've had periods that have been very different phases from others. Would you say that was the most difficult time for all those who were particularly very actively involved because the tension was so high then, and it's through those kind of times that one become cognizant of the dangers that are involved in that process? Could you give us a little bit of feeling of how you felt and others that were close to the movement during that really crisis period?
Absolutely. It's a scary time to be. That was probably the scariest of times because we had people that we knew were basically not playing with a full deck, and they're filled with hate, and their thinking was not rational. And they were doing some crazy things. And there were a lot of people who did not believe that when the bombings went off, that it was the Aryan nations. They said, no, they wouldn't do that. Not where they live, they wouldn't do that. They'll go somewhere else and do it. And I had a problem with that kind of thinking either. Well, that kind of thinking also, saying that it's okay for them to be here and then go do their thing somewhere else. But they were doing it here. And what we have to realize is those people don't think like we do. They don't think like normal people do about what's right and what's wrong. All they think about is one thing, a pure, white, Anglo-Saxon area and that's what they want, and that's what they believe that they're entitled to. And that part of it is scary. And thank goodness we don't have many of these people in our area today. We still have a few left, but we don't have too many. And I think with the laws that we have in place now, I don't think this is a good place for them to be. I think they're going to have to find somewhere else to go. And I feel sorry for the other place they have to go. I'm just thankful that it isn't here.
At the time we're taping this program, a story has broken a few days before this program that the evidence is very strong that a paramilitary training camp has been located in the state of Montana at a ranch. And the owner of that ranch and his son are missing from the ranch, or they have fled. And law enforcement is looking into the problem. And there's evidence, according to the paper, that they have found evidence on that ranch that for maybe a year there's been training paramilitary of hate groups, and skinheads have even been involved. And I'm back to the...
Watch it when you say skinheads, though.
Yes. We call it racist skinheads,
oh, okay.
the movement, not...
That's better.
Not Marshall's kind of skinhead. But in relation to that problem, as you talked about the tough laws in Idaho, and there are 8 different categories in which there's anti-hate crime legislation in Idaho. They do not have that particular piece of legislation in Montana. And I know this is somewhat requiring you to theorize, but do you think that if Montana would have had that kind of legislation in place, that there was far less chance that that activity would have been taking place for the last year?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't think Washington has that kind of legislation in place either. And I think both those states need to take a real hard look at that. Because, you know, as soon as they didn't do it in Idaho, and the reason they didn't do it in Idaho is because we have the legislation in place. And if they did do it in Idaho, we could have cracked down on them a long time ago. They knew about this quite some time before they cracked down on them. Why they waited so long, I don't know. I'm sure there must have been reasons. But if they were here, they would have been in jail.
Because there's a cooperation between the passage of laws and having very effective law enforcement and having courts that address those problems, and also like what you've been talking about today, in the business community, in labor unions, within colleges, and having symposiums and workshops. All those, it's a combination of all those activities that send messages, and those who choose a life of hate find it very uncomfortable. And in addition to that, in a community where there is rallying for human rights, they also can't find converts very easily when all those activities are taking place. And so I brought you here today to let you tell this story, but also to commend you, because I think it's very, very important that we have people like you who work so hard and even sacrifice themselves financially and others so the message can go forth. And we have a different kind of community because of the Kootenai County Task Force and people like you who've been active. And again, many thanks to you.
Tony, I thank you, but really the people who need commending are the people like Bill Wasmuth, like Tony Stewart, like Norm Gissel, like Skip Cook, Eric and Teresa Mays, and the list goes on and on of all the people who are involved in the area. And it's, you know, there's just lots and lots.
Well, thank you.
I thank you for everything you've done.
Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you've enjoyed our program, and I invite you to be with us again next week at this same time. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
North Idaho College Public Forum can be seen at the same time each week over this station. This production was videotaped earlier by an NIC student crew for viewing at this more appropriate time.
You were going to tell me something. We're off now.